Hi, I'm Steve D. Clark. I'm an EAP counselor with Ascension, Wisconsin EAP. Today I'm doing a presentation on suicide prevention, what every employee needs to know. This conversation is very awkward and very difficult, and I'm sure the last thing you want to do is ask a coworker or someone else if they're thinking about suicide. It is very difficult, even for a seasoned person like myself. But today I want to tell you that it could be the most important question you ask someone. You'll also notice that I'll be saying someone died by suicide or completed suicide, as opposed to committed suicide. I'd like to take away that term committed suicide because it sounds like a sin or someone committed a crime. The objectives are that we are going to discuss and identify who is at risk at suicide, and we're going to describe the ways to respond if someone is at risk. And lastly, we're going to discuss reactions after a crisis situation. Before we get started, I'd just like to say that everyone has a different experience with suicide. It could be someone very close to you, a family member, a loved one, a friend, or it could be a high school acquaintance, a coworker, or even a beloved celebrity. Everyone has some experience with suicide. So if this gets to be too difficult of a conversation or you feel you need a break, please do so. It's important to take care of yourself, and I want you to be kind and compassionate to yourself. Imagine if half of these people suddenly vanished. In 2018, 48,320 people died by suicide. That averages out to 132 people per day. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in this country. Now let's do the math. If you have 3% of people thinking about suicide in the past year, how many people are employed in your company? If you have 1,000 people, that means 30 people have been thinking about suicide. Who is at risk? As you can see from this list, many people are at risk. I'll point out some of the ones we're most concerned about, and that would be people who have been marginalized by society, people who have had someone in their family die by suicide. They're much more at risk. People who suffer with depression, people who suffer from drug abuse, especially if they have drug or alcohol abuse and they've just gone through a divorce. Those are ones we're usually most concerned about. Also those who have lethal means, people who have guns in their home. And the most common suicide actually is white males in middle age from 45 to 64. They comprise of 70% of all the suicides. Warning signs. Warning signs are often hopelessness is a big one. The one therapist that we are concerned about is someone who's agitated. If someone's agitated and on edge, we're more concerned about them because they're more impulsive and they're more ready to act. Other warning signs could be someone who suddenly is withdrawing from everyone. People who have extreme mood swings. Another sign can be if someone suddenly becomes calmer. These people often, once they become calmer, is because they've decided they're going to go through with it and they're getting their affairs in order, they're giving things away, and they're saying goodbyes. Here is a PET scan of someone who's depressed and someone who's not depressed. The reason I'm showing this is because someone who has depression, it is a real illness. Oftentimes people will say, well, just exercise every morning or turn that frown upside down. Look on the bright side. However, people with biological depression, it's not that easy. It's kind of like walking through mud. You're slowly walking, you're trying to think through things, and everything is going very slowly. It's very difficult. People who have major depression, they can't even get out of bed. So mental illness is real. Wisconsin high school students. As you can see from this graphic, from 2013 to 2017, both males and females have increased a few percentage points in either planning on suicide or attempting suicide. Now you may be wondering, well, why am I talking about high school students? Well, a couple reasons. One, you probably have kids, and if you don't, your coworkers have kids. And coworkers, I'm sure that you know, they like to talk about their kids, how they're doing, what they're up to. So if a coworker says that their son or daughter has a drug problem, using drugs, or especially if they said that their son or daughter said that they were going to kill themselves, and the coworker says, well, they're just trying to get attention, and it's they're just being dramatic. I think that would be very important for you to say, you know what, you should probably get an assessment. Call the EAP or a therapist or a doctor, just any type of professional help, and just get it checked out. Because that's nothing you want to fool around with. And that could be saving a life. LGBTQ. 20% of these students attempt suicide compared to 5% of their heterosexual peers. A person who is gay, lesbian, or transgender, they not only get harassed by their fellow students, but their family may not accept them either. And they also would have self-hatred. So this is a bad combination, and that's why even though our society is more open to people of different genders and sexualities, they have a higher risk for suicide. Suicide in a multicultural context. Well, there are many different cultures in our society, and many of them, suicide is a very taboo subject. They don't talk about it. So it's hard to know what every different culture has. So let me tell you the safest way or the softest way you can ask someone if they're suicidal without saying the word suicide. And that would be, is to say, do you feel safe? If you went home, do you feel you would be safe? That's probably the softest way to say it. I typically will say, do you have any thoughts of harming yourself? And so there's different ways you can say it without coming out saying, are you going to kill yourself? Now, Jesse has been going through a really hard time. He tells you that his mother recently died, his uncle completed suicide last year, and he admits he's been thinking about death a lot. Now, what does your natural instinct want to say? And what could you say to meet him where he's at? You can take a couple minutes to discuss this if you'd like. Meeting people where they're at. When people are upset and distraught, usually the first thing we want to do is to cheer them up. Hey, things aren't so bad. Come on. What's wrong? I mean, you got a job, a wife and kids, you got a nice car. There's so many people who are worse off than you. They may agree with you, but deep down they know that you don't understand. So meeting them where they're at goes like this. If they say they're really struggling, the best thing you can do is to say, sorry to hear that. That sounds really difficult. How are you coping? John is a funny guy at work. He's always joking around. Yesterday he put a tie around his neck and made a gesture like he's hanging, and then he laughed it off. Today he put his hand to his head like a gun and made an explosive noise. If John was your coworker, what would you say or do? Most people would feel uncomfortable with what John did, but they would laugh it off and feel awkward. But I encourage you to muscle through the awkwardness and ask John some questions. Like, John, I noticed you made some of these gestures lately about suicide. Can you tell me more about that? Or what's going on with this? Why are you doing this? It's important to take it seriously. Jokes about self-harm, suicide, guns, violence are not funny, and they do not belong in the workplace. Is it okay to talk about it? Many people are afraid to bring up the idea of suicide because you're concerned it may give them ideas. But research doesn't back that at all. Oftentimes, if you ask someone, they may just say, no, I'm not thinking about that. No way, I would never do that. But sometimes you may get someone to say, yeah, I do have self-harm thoughts. And if you don't ask them, they won't bring it up. The reason they don't bring it up because they don't want to burden someone or think they're crazy. But once you ask them, it kind of gives them permission. They feel more comfortable telling you about it. Conversation starters. You can say something along the lines of, I noticed you feel not yourself lately. Can you tell me what's going on? Can you tell me more about that? And then whatever they say, you reflect back what they've said. So if they're talking about a hard time going through a divorce, whatever it is, then you'd say, yes, that must be very difficult. You may be concerned that you're bringing them down a negative path, but that's not the case. If you are validating their feelings and you're telling them, yes, this is very difficult, I'm sorry you're going through this, they will feel heard and connected to you as opposed to feeling like you're bringing them down a rabbit hole. Another good conversation starter can be, people who are in a very tough situation like you are sometimes think of ending their life. I'm wondering if that's true for you. This can be a very good question because it's concerning and it shows that you care. Carol just doesn't seem herself lately. She has been more irritable and looks tired all the time. Yesterday you overheard her say she wishes she'd fall asleep and never wake up. If Carol was your coworker, how would you start the conversation letting her know that you're concerned? You could say, Carol, I've noticed you seem not yourself lately. Yesterday I heard you say you wish you'd fall asleep and never wake up. Can you tell me what's going on? How not to ask the question. You don't want to imply a negative connotation or that they're crazy. So don't say something like, you're not suicidal, are you? You're not thinking about killing yourself, are you? You wouldn't do anything stupid like that, would you? Suicide's a dumb idea. I surely hope you're not thinking about suicide. If you ask it that way, they're going to shut down and they will not be open with you. Carol confides in you that she's been going through a really hard divorce and nothing ever seems to go right. She tells you an example after example of things that have been going wrong lately. So if you remember Carol said that she wishes she'd fall asleep and never wake up, how do you think you'd ask Carol if she's been thinking about ending her life? You could say, Carol, you have a lot going on in your life right now. No wonder you haven't been yourself lately. Sometimes people going through difficult circumstances like this think about ending their life. Have you had thoughts like this? What if they say no? Ask them what they're living for. This is a very good question, because if right away they say, oh, my kids, I would never do that. I mean, my faith. If they can rattle off reasons why they'd never do it, that's a good indication that they're not planning on or that they would take action to end their life. And let them know you care, especially let them know about the EAP. What if they say yes? Well, then you can ask more questions about level of risk. But I would like to say this is a good time that you would go to a manager, supervisor, or HR. When they say yes, that they are thinking about suicide or planning on suicide, that's when things get a little more serious. If they say that they are thinking about suicide, that's when you can ask, do you have plans on suicide, and what is your plan? There are 3 key risk factors: lethal means, distress, alcohol, and drugs. If you can eliminate any one of these sides of the triangle, you can reduce the risk of violence greatly. Lethal means, I always ask, do you have guns in the house? If they do have guns, get them out. Have them give them to someone. Make sure they have a specific name they're giving it to, so you can follow up if necessary. Distress. If they're very distressed, what you can do is make sure they're with someone. You can call someone or make sure when they go home they'll be with somebody. Alcohol or drugs, you can see if they're using, if they have drugs at their home. If you can reduce that risk and keep them sober, that's another big factor. Offer help. If they are at minimal risk, let's say they have a thought about not wanting to live, but they would never act on it, it's still important to encourage them to seek help. I would tell them about the EAP, and it's best to give them our name and phone number so they have it readily available. In more serious situations, you have to be more direct, and you'd have to say something along the lines of, I have some numbers, let's call the EAP together, or let's call your emergency contact. Connect. Besides the EAP, there are suicide helpline numbers. As you can see on the graphic, they can call a doctor or a psychiatrist. They can call a counselor, a social worker. Family or friends are important. They may have a sponsor. It can be best to ask them who they want to connect to. They may have a good resource themselves. If they're unwilling to seek help in the moment, ask them what family members or friends you might call. If you are seriously concerned about them, not telling someone is not an option. It's important never to promise them that you'll keep it secret. Let them know that you can't keep it a secret because their safety is most important. What about confidentiality? You might have heard of the term HIPAA, usually at a doctor's office, and that is about confidentiality and that your information cannot go to anybody else. However, you are not bound by confidentiality. So if you're concerned about someone, you can go to their emergency contact, or you can go reach out to a friend or family member, or even call the police. You are not bound by confidentiality. Now, confidentiality for counselors like me, HIPAA allows us to break confidentiality if someone is talking about ending their life, if someone is homicidal, and also for child abuse. Those are the 3 reasons we would break confidentiality: to keep people safe as well as children safe, if there is imminent threat. At this point, you have to get them to the ER, and the best way to do that is have the emergency contact come and get them and take them. You'd want to alert the ER that they're coming, and you'd want to make sure that they arrived. If the emergency contact is not available, then see if you and another person together can take your coworker to the ER. If that's not possible, then you would have to call law enforcement. If you aren't sure what to do, call the EAP. We are available 24/7. Imminent threat. While you're waiting for the emergency contact to get there, you want to make them as comfortable as possible. Get them water, get them Kleenex if they're crying, and you want to give lots of reassurance that things are going to be okay, you're going to get through this, because it's true, they are going to be okay and they will get through it. You want to be as calm and as soothing a tone as you can. If it seems appropriate, you could either hold their hand, put a hand on their back, whatever seems appropriate. Crisis situations. If someone already hurt themselves, or if they said they'd taken a bottle of pills, or they have a weapon in the car and they're threatening to use it, call 911. If you can't leave the person, then have someone else do it. And of course, let the manager know immediately. It's best to reassure them that they're going to be okay and stay at their side until help comes. Now, what do you do when the incident is over? It's always important to debrief. Whoever you worked with in this crisis, it's good to talk to each other about what you did, about your experience, and validate that you both did the best you could and you did the right thing. Again, calling the EAP can be very helpful. We have done a lot of these, and we can talk about the situation and help you through it. Hopefully, you feel a little more comfortable talking about suicide. It is a skill you can learn, and practice makes it a little easier, but it's still tough. Summary. We discuss ways to identify people who are at risk at suicide. We discussed ways to respond if risk is identified. And we discussed reactions after a crisis situation. If you have any further questions, feel free to call Ascension Wisconsin EAP at 1-800-540-3758. Thank you.